My friends at EasyCater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more. Hey friends, welcome to episode 227. This one is special because I'm sharing a recording of a conversation that I had with my CEO, David Karandish, CEO of Capacity, where I've been working since 2017, partnering with David, and I was hire number one, and now we have over 100 employees, so going to be a fun conversation. But this episode was actually originally for the founder and the Force Multiplier podcast, and we chatted with Hallie Warner on that show, and she graciously allowed us to share this conversation on the Leader Assistant podcast. So you can check out the links and the show notes at leaderassistant.com/227, leaderassistant.com/227. And I hope you enjoy this conversation with my CEO, David Karandish, and again, Hallie Warner from the founder and the Force Multiplier podcast, which is a great show that you should check out as well. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
The Leader Assistant podcast exists to encourage and challenge assistants to become confident, game-changing leader assistants.
With so much on your plate, wouldn't it be nice if ordering food for the office were easy and reliable? My friends at EasyCater are workplace catering pros, helping you find food for everything from daily employee meals to staff meetings and special events. With EasyCater's network of over 100,000 restaurants nationwide, you'll have a huge variety of options near you for any group size, dietary need, or budget. Your food arrives on time as ordered, all supported 24/7 by EasyCater's team of experts. Visit easycater.com/leaderassistant to find out more.
Hi, David and Jeremy. Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Hey, guys. So let's just get right into it. So, David, you co-founded Capacity in 2017. Why was your first hire an executive assistant?
I believe that a great EA is like having a great partner. I know myself well enough to know what I'm good at and what I'm not good at. I know myself well enough to know that I need someone who can help me drive and be more effective. And it truly is a force multiplier when you bring on a great executive assistant to work with the CEO, particularly in a startup where you don't have a lot of structure, you don't have a lot of process. It's all hands on deck. Having a great EA is a difference maker.
Did that maybe like first 6 months to 12 months look like working with an EA versus what the partnership looks like today?
I think when you start an organization, you are trying to fly the plane as you're building it in the air. And so there was a lot of, in that first kind of 6 months, a lot of time of doing anything from finding office space to doing incorporation data to getting our first recruits on. We didn't have a recruiter when we started. Jeremy was our recruiter. Jeremy was our office administrator. Jeremy was our keep the lights on person for 12 different areas of the organization.
And today, how does that, like, how do you work together today? What does that look like? How are you communicating? How are you managing projects and priorities?
Yeah, I mean, first thing is we do a weekly one-on-one where I despite my hectic schedule, I try to make that every single week and not move it, not make it I'll punt it to next week sort of thing. We also are obviously very big on using Slack. We're communicating with each other all day, back and forth on Slack. We also use Capacity to help automate certain things. So answering certain types of questions that I would have to go to Jeremy for before, I've got the bot to answer some of that stuff as well. Awesome. And then the other thing I would say is, and I think this is really important. In my last company, I worked about the same amount. So 60 hours or so a week. But I had a very up and down schedule. So it was very different from day to day, very different from week to week. There wasn't a lot of norms around what that could look like. So one night I might be home for dinner with my wife at 5:30. Another wife that would be dead. Another night I might be home at closer to 8:30. And so when we started this company, one of the things that Jeremy and I worked through is what would the ideal calendar look like? How can we take what's still going to be a lot of work, but try to create some discipline around, like for me, every Monday and Wednesday night, I work late. Every Tuesday night, I do a date night with my wife. Thursday nights, kind of flex. I take a kind of work Sabbath, email Sabbath, Slack Sabbath from Saturday afternoon to Sunday afternoon. And so figuring out those rhythms was really helpful, because then also for Jeremy, it's like, oh, Jeremy knows David's working late on Wednesday. Jeremy knows not to ping David at 7:00 on a Tuesday when I'm on a date with my wife. So it's that kind of rhythm, getting that set up right from the beginning was crucial to making sure we can both be optimally productive.
Yeah, so it sounds like you had a very intentional conversation about not just the calendar, but in my mind, it's also about, work-life balance. And that is obviously maybe important to you. But I'm also curious for both of you, like, what is your philosophy around work-life balance? It's such a, buzzword these days, but what does that really mean to each of you? And how are you engaging in that, and also engaging in that with the conversation with the rest of your company? Is it just between the two of you, or does that sort of philosophy permeate the rest of your organization?
Yeah, so I think early on, what we did when we were smaller, we instituted Wednesday work late across the company. It wasn't necessarily required, but it was encouraged, and we get some dinner and we just work on brainstorming and building and figuring out creative solutions to the problems that we had. And so that was kind of showing like, hey, we're inviting you to join us on this kind of structured ideal week calendar. And then I think as the company has grown, it shows up in different ways. Like, for example, David's very clear about, like he mentioned, his 24-hour, no email, no Slack, block on the weekends. And then we also instituted before, so Slack did not have the feature to schedule messages initially. And so I think we had an extra bot or something that we added to do this. But now, thankfully, Slack has that built in where you can actually schedule a message. So David has done a lot better job of, hey, if it's midnight and he's working late on Wednesday and he has a crazy idea and he wants to send it to someone, he can send it to them, but they don't get a ping at midnight. They get it the next morning during work hours. And so he's able to schedule that. So just being intentional with things like that I think has shown the team that, we respect their personal life and their family time. And we're going to work hard and we're going to work a lot, but we're going to also rest well and take time off.
Yeah, I really appreciate that you're so transparent about it, and that you're really leading, David especially, you're leading by example. Because very, very often people will say that's what they believe in their organization, but then the leader and sometimes the EA, they're not operating that way at all. They're totally disrupting everyone else's life.
Yeah, I mean, Jeremy came from a previous gig where it was pretty expected that he was on call through the weekends. And I don't know, I think in the last year, how many times have we talked on the weekend? Maybe 3 times?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Rare.
Something like that. So yeah, I think it starts from the top. I don't love the term work-life balance because it connotates like, hey, I've got this scale, and if I just put enough work here or enough personal time here, then it'll all just kind of even out. I like to think of more work-life wholeness, where you are wholly in what you are doing when you're doing it. So if I'm at my aquarium field trip, I am not checking Slack. I am wholly in while I am there. Conversely, when I'm working, I am working. I'm not essing around, to use an Arrested Development phrase. I'm 2 feet in. When I'm on my date night with my wife, I'm not out, firing through emails and doing stuff like that. So I kind of think of it less at, hey, we just have to go tip the scales and get everything in this equal balance. you're going to have times in your life where personal things are, personal time needs to have a bigger dial up, or certain work seasons where things are going to have to dial up. But it's more about, are you being whole? Are you wholly in, 2 feet in, whatever you're doing at all time? And I can say I have many leadership challenges, failures, issues, flaws. Jeremy knows all of them.
Jeremy, do you want to share all of those with us? Or?
We don't have time. We don't have time.
For a different day. But I haven't met anyone who's like, you know what, that David really, he's really not 2 feet in what he does. And those are the types of people we want to work with.
Totally. Yeah, completely agree. We don't love the work-life balance at our company either. We call it work-life presence, which is very much what you're calling it, that work-life that wholeness. So obviously time is something that you guys probably talk about a lot. And it sounds like you're constantly optimizing time in your work days. And clearly that's what Capacity helps teams with, is saving time, solving major issues for teams, reducing time spent searching for information, answering repetitive tasks. So how is, what do people need to know in order to embrace AI automation and tools like Capacity and other language tools like ChatGPT? It's clearly at the heart of your organization. Like, what do people need to know?
Yeah, so let's kind of start at the top. If you look at the history of computing, it's been a history of taking machines and abstracting away different interfaces. So my dad was an electrical engineer. He worked on physical computers with switches and physical devices, and then punch cards, and then DOS, and then Windows, and then web, and now mobile apps. So each time what we're doing is we're abstracting away from these zeros and ones. The current paradigm where we're at is we're now at the point to where natural language can abstract away as an interface from what we want to do technologically. So I could ask Alexa what the weather is. I could ask Capacity, how do I connect to the VPN? So you have that kind of path going. And if you think about where we're heading ultimately with that, I think the natural language processing is the penultimate interface before we get to the final interface of thought, being able to think your question and have it link directly back into an AI system. We're not there yet, but that will be on the horizon. So that's kind of one thing that's happened. The other thing that's happened is companies have moved their systems of record from these on-premise server in the back room kind of setups to the cloud. And everybody thought, wow, if I've got my CRM in the cloud, I've got my docs in my cloud, I've got my help desk in the cloud, all my problems are going to get solved. And it turns out that these systems of record are not great systems of engagement. And so you end up with Salesforce instances that are really bloated. When somebody just wants to go add a quick note to a particular contact, or you end up with people having to dive through folders and folders and folders on SharePoint when really they just want to ask the question into the policy and go get their answer back. So you've got the abstracting away of these interfaces to where natural language is now prominent. You've got everybody moving their stuff to the cloud, and then with cloud connectivity, you could put a natural language interface on top of it. But with the advent of what's happening from an automation perspective, you might have a process that cuts across multiple systems. So if you think about onboarding a new team member, you might be scheduling something with their calendar, sending the documents out of the cloud drive. You might be updating information in the HR system. So it's not just working in one system. It's a workflow that cuts across the different areas of the company. So that's another thread that's going on. Lastly, if you look at the history of automation itself, think of automation as really just almost like a proxy for human labor, right? So when the car came out, they still talk about cars in terms of horsepower, right? It was literally the power of the car is measured in how many horses you replaced, right? You fast forward till where we're at now. Up until recently, most automation was replacing physical labor, right? Taking that horse to this place, or you think about everything in a construction site, all the physical labor that's now being done by machines. What's happened with AI is if you think of AI as simply put, software that learns and applies patterns, then we now have the ability to not just outsource physical labor, but to begin to outsource cognitive labor. So an example of this might be even in our own product, the AI can answer a lot of questions, but we still have tickets that get created in the help desk. Used to be that if a ticket went to the help desk, somebody would have to completely write out the entire manual response. Now, we can go into the AI and say, make this longer, improve this response, summarize the 3 questions above this. And so we're taking what used to be human labor, human cognitive labor, we're saying, hey, I think an AI can start to take on some of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And obviously you both have been in that world for a while, and it's starting to become a bit more, new to me, but it's fascinating. And of course, especially with the audience that I talk to a lot, one of the first questions that comes up based on fear is, this is going to just replace my job as an assistant. You're no longer going to need an executive assistant in an organization. So what would you say to assistants who are concerned about their jobs being replaced by AI and automation?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say there was a prescient book that came out a few years ago called The Leader Assistant.
Yes.
That talked about how we are heading toward a world where if you're not using an AI to better augment and improve your job, you will get replaced by an AI. And when that came out, that was a very controversial and very minority opinion statement at the time. It was borderline provocative, I would go as far as to say, because at that point, very few companies were using AIs day to day. Now, the number of executives I've seen in the last 6 months who are completely rethinking every single role in their company, they're now saying, if I don't have an AI-enabled support function for every single part of the org, we're falling behind. So I think the words of you either work with the AI or the AI replaces you are absolutely prescient today.
Yeah. I agree. And I know, Jeremy, that you've talked about this before and obviously in the book, but I've completely agree from day one. I mean, the value of an assistant and value of an EA is not in our ability to retrieve information or in our ability to answer repetitive questions. It is to make better, in my opinion, it's to be that strategic thought partner. It's to help lead up to your executives. It's to be that leader assistant and help them make decisions and help lead other people in the organization. And that's my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, Hallie. And I think that the point of the AI taking our jobs and all that, I think it's really, it's kind of the wrong question. I think the real question is you should be asking, if you're an executive assistant, is what is your job? Like, what is my job? And so one of the things I like with working with David is, we've talked about this for the last few years, but he basically said, Jeremy, your job is to help me stay healthy, stay married, and stay in business. And, so when I think about what's my job, that's my job, is to help David stay healthy, stay married, and stay in business. And I'm going to use tools like Capacity or Zapier or whatever to help automate certain things along the way that help in all 3 of those areas. And so I'm excited to be part of the AI revolution and embrace it and automate before I'm automated and all that fun stuff. And so I think that it's just for those listening, that are hesitant, jump in, try it out, sign up for the ChatGPT beta, sign up for, Google Bard or whatever, however you say it, and just try it out,
Yeah, I agree.
The other thing I was just going to add to that is gravity naturally pulls on all 3 of those. You don't naturally stay healthy, right? Gravity pulls you toward that bucket of ice cream and not working out and not getting sleep and not getting rest, etc. Gravity pulls on your marriage when you have a startup, when you're growing a company, when you're traveling all the time. Gravity pulls on business. Businesses change. Business is fragile. Business is hard to do. So you're not starting from rest on all 3 of those. There is a force that is pulling on all 3 of those by default. And so a good EA coming in and saying, hey, I'm going to help you stay healthy. I'm going to help you stay married. And I'm going to help you stay in business. that's not starting with statics. It's starting with dynamics from the get-go.
Yeah. I love that. And that so far cannot be automated. The parts of it can, right? But not the understanding the whole person and understanding, all of the complexities of that person's life and how things, making judgment calls about where time should be spent. And so that I think that's where the EA role is going in many ways, is going to be it's a higher level role to a certain degree.
And I'll add to this, Jeremy, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this one, but I think a lot of people think about EAs in terms of time management. Mm-hmm. Like I, as the EA, I'm going to help my exec get more out of his or her time. And I think that's part of it for sure. And I don't want to discount that. But I actually think that energy management is just as important, maybe more important, because we all have 24 hours in a day. Nobody can add or remove that. But how we spend them and the energy we can apply. Mm-hmm. When someone is in a heads down creative mode, it's a very different mode of operating than when you're in a leadership organizational development type mode versus when you're in a sales prep mode versus when you're in a planning set. Like these are all different modalities in which an executive needs to be able to move, sometimes between throughout the day. And so part of the EA role, in my perspective, is not just making sure all the meetings are lined up and in place, and I get to the chapel on time, sort of thing. But it's making sure that I'm at the chapel with the right person. Mm-hmm. I'm managing the energy I have toward that particular endeavor.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. What are you guys working on next?
Yeah, so we have been going very deep in terms of applying AI in an omni-channel way. And when we started out, we put Capacity into Slack so it could start answering questions over IM. We added Microsoft Teams. We've since added email. And we've now just recently added SMS. So you can actually text the bot and the bot can respond back. When I think about the next layer, we have been pushing very hard on plugging directly, not just into your email support box, but on top of your email itself. So if I send Jeremy a question, hey, Jeremy, how do I register for these benefits? Even if that was already in the bot, when Jeremy pulls up the email to respond, it will actually inject the answer directly into his Gmail or directly into his Outlook. And so we're making it so that we think emails should be highly automated with technology like this. Another thing we're seeing is that EAs in particular have so many just requests for travel, requests for frequent flyer numbers, requests for scheduling, requests for personal health data, all this sort of stuff. And so we're working on a package for Capacity specifically targeted for EAs who can come in and say, okay, I've got the top 250 questions every executive asks from, you name it, A to Z. And so instead of you're a new EA joining a new organization, you should be able to get the answer to that, that content pack, and then be able to start automating a lot of what you need to go do.
That is amazing. I'm very excited to see all of that stuff come out, and I'll be keeping an eye on what you guys are doing because it's very exciting. And I really appreciate you spending the time with me today.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks, Hallie. And I'll just say, like we, as David alluded to, we've been working so much on kind of the broad platform, all the different elements of the platform. Now we're excited to go deep, and one of those use cases is with EA. So we're hoping that we can share more about that in the coming days.
Yeah, very exciting. Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.